How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at the very first episode of Freddy's Nightmares. And since we're talking about a brand new series, a quick explanation is in order. Basically, in Freddy's Nightmares, we would have an anthology horror TV show, so every single episode is its own story, and it'd be hosted by Freddy Krueger himself. Freddy Krueger, mainly just in the wraparound segments, but there would be 8 episodes, I believe, that were actually Freddy Krueger stories, so he would pop up in an extended role from time to time, so that's pretty cool. And I will say, for this series of reviews, it's pretty much just going to be first-time impressions from me. I haven't really seen this series before, and that's because it had a pretty bad history on physical media. Some of the episodes were released on VHS, and a few of them were released as bonus features when the movies came to DVD, but we never really got a complete series release. Quite infamously, at one point in time, this show was put on Tubi, but it was pulled after just a few weeks. That, combined with the lack of physical media, has led to this show having a reputation as being very hard to find and very hard to hold on to. At the time of recording, it is streaming on Plex, so I'm kind of in this race now to watch and review all the episodes before it gets pulled. Hopefully it doesn't, but let's see. I will say, with the new Nightmare on Elm Street 4Ks coming out, I have my fingers crossed that maybe we'll get some sort of announcement of a complete series DVD set. I'm not really holding out hopes, but I would really like that. This series has been so shaky, it would be great to just have it in one place and know it's not going to go anywhere. Whoever owns the rights to this, I'm just telling you, I would buy those DVDs in a heartbeat, so it would be really cool. But anyway, all that aside, let's talk about the actual episode itself. Episode 1 of the show was entitled No More Mr. Nice Guy, which coincidentally the very next year would be the tagline of Wes Craven's other film Shocker, which also features the song. I guess because Shocker would come out later that it's more of a coincidence than an Easter egg. Still cool though. Anyway, this episode originally aired October 9th, 1988, so just in time for the Halloween season, and was actually directed by Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper, you guys probably know for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Poltergeist, and Salem's Lot, but him and Robert Englund actually worked together before on the movie Eaten Alive, where Englund played the character of Buck. So cool to see the two reuniting for this episode. The episode stars Ian Patrick Williams, Anne E. Curry, William Frankfather, and of course, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger himself. And since this is the first episode of the series, this of course would be one of the Freddy Krueger episodes, and this is actually Freddy's origin story, which totally makes sense. If you're doing a new Freddy Krueger show, this is a story a lot of people would be interested in, and let's go ahead and tell Freddy's origin. Now, the cynical among us may point out, don't we already know Freddy Krueger's origin, like it was pretty much explained to us in the movies? And yeah, that is true, but it is cool to actually see it, to actually know everything that happened. So yeah, I was entertained by that, but it doesn't just stay in the path you know, and I really am glad that it does something a little more different. When I saw the courtroom, I was a little worried that it was just going to be a courtroom drama with a predictable ending, but that is not the case. Freddy's death actually occurs about at the halfway point of this episode, and the other half features the cop that initially arrested Freddy as Freddy's first victim after his death. So the episode kind of acts as a proto-nightmare movie, which I think is a pretty cool idea. So I like that it gives us a story we wanted to see that we already knew, but puts a new spin on it by focusing on this new character. A new character that still is very much tied to Freddy's story. Now that being said, is this a perfect episode? No. The show, of course, is notorious for being quite a cheap show, show, and yeah, you can tell. There's something about the way it looks where it's not quite cinematic. The shots are relatively simple, and there is something about it that just feels pretty cheap. But looks aside, we have to factor in that A Nightmare on Elm Street was a very special effects heavy movie, and that's where a lot of the sequels really did shine with big over-the-top gimmicks. Are we going to be able to do those on TV? Not quite near as well. There are a few funny gags, and to be fair, they did spend a little money on this show. I was watching Monsters recently, and that had no budget, so to get to see them actually do a few gags, it's okay, but it's nowhere near a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and you really do see the quality drop off. One thing besides the budget that really does get me is the characters. The characters are very flat and underdeveloped in one note. Like, for real, all the people in this town, they pretty much just hate Freddy Krueger, and that's their one character trait, and we're not going to get anything really interesting out of them. And this sheriff, he does have a bit of a moral battle going on in his hands, and I do wish it was more developed because it does play out pretty standard and pretty predictably. And of course, if you guys are fans of A Nightmare on Elm Street, keep an eye out for a few continuity errors. Yeah, that is one thing that really bugs me about prequels, but what are you going to do? Now, even though this is cheap, it's not near as good as the movies, it's pretty underdeveloped, and to be honest, there are a few things in here that really don't make much sense. All that being said, I do give it a little bit of leniency because this is cheap 80s TV, and you can really see they were trying to do the best with it that they could. It's entertaining enough. It's cool to actually see Freddy's origin story, even if this is not the best version of it. A film version of his origin would have been really, really cool, but sadly we never got that. But we did get this. It's fun enough for what it is. Just, again, know it's cheap 80s TV before you get into it. Still totally okay. But all that being said, I do want to talk about the episode's plot. I'm not going to do any major spoilers, so I'll be avoiding the end, but I do want to break down and analyze a few things and talk about the episode in some specifics, so no major spoilers, but from here on out, let's take a deeper dive. We open up with a pretty fun gag where you see this newscaster reading the news before Freddy Krueger zaps him away and takes over the TV. You get to see the color test pattern, and it turns into the red and green of Freddy's sweater. And I will say this is something that's kind of lost on streaming. If you were just tuning in on your TV, this might actually get you. You might actually think it's a real news report and then go, whoa, wait, what's happening here? But again, it's lost when you're not watching it live on TV. But still a fun gag that Freddy's literally taking over your television. Well, Freddy just plops the news report right in front of his trial, so I guess sending him through time? He doesn't seem to care as he just starts reporting on it. A fun opening gag, but don't think about it too hard. We go into Freddy's trial and we get to hear them talk about some of his victims. I think they only get to like 7 or 8 people, but I thought he killed closer to 30? Yeah, I don't know. But they have him there in a box, which is a cool visual that he's like locked up at the trial. Also though, he is wearing his Christmas sweater, which you think if it was his trial he'd be wearing a suit, but no, he's just gonna be wearing a sweater because otherwise the audience wouldn't know it's Freddy Krueger. And I do have to mention one thing in this episode is before he gets burned, they constantly hide Freddy's face, which I don't think that would be that big of a reveal because, I mean, we just assume he looks like Robert Englund. I guess they're trying to keep up the mystery, but sadly I feel we could have gotten a lot more out of Freddy if we weren't trying to do this bit, and I would have loved to see more of him before he actually died, but sadly we have this as a limiting device. Inside the courtroom, we see the sheriff that arrested him and his 2 daughters are in the courtroom as well. They're wearing the dresses, so I think it's implied that they're supposed to be the jump rope girls. They're a little bit older, but I guess the trial drug on for a few years or something. And we get to hear about the night Freddy Krueger was arrested. Apparently, he was about to go after these girls when the sheriff Saul stepped in and arrested him, saving saving his daughter's lives. However, it turns out in his haste to save his family, he forgot to read Freddy Krueger his rights, and that's what's going to be what gets Freddy off in this continuity. It does bug me because this is our first major continuity error. Nancy's mom in the movie says that someone signed the paperwork for the search warrant in the wrong place, but in this version we don't have a search warrant because he was literally in active pursuit and it's reading rights instead. I get what they were going for and how they had to work it into this sheriff's story. The continuity error bugs me, but I guess Nancy's mom just heard it wrong. Whatever. Freddy, of course, is free to go now, and the whole town basically hates this sheriff. And yeah, it is very on the nose and very one note. Why did you make that mistake? I mean, even his wife seems to hate him, so yeah, everybody just hates this guy. And of course, his two daughters are traumatized, almost being killed, and he has one that's almost completely quiet and says, "Don't kill Freddy, he'll only come back stronger," which it's weird that she would know that. The two sisters are interesting, but their plot never really gets developed. I think I heard someone say that there's an episode later on, My Sister's Keeper, that elaborates on these two. I can't wait to get there because it feels like they set something up and we didn't have enough of a payoff for it. Well, after that, we of course get the angry mob going after Freddy Krueger, and there again, very on the nose, very one-track mind, very evil dies tonight. They go to the power plant where Freddy worked and quite easily find his evil lair, full of a bunch of evidence that the police never found and the factory never found and cleaned up. It's just still there, all perfectly preserved. Yeah, that's kind of weird, but this only furthers the fires of the mob, and they're determined to catch Freddy. And I will say, shouldn't Nancy's parents be in this mob? I don't think I see them. It's more like pillars of the community, and it doesn't seem like a whole group of angry parents. I really wish we had put the Thompsons in there, but whatever. I assume someone in the background is supposed to be them. But then we get Freddy, literally the first day he's out, going in wreaking havoc. He has an ice cream truck for some reason. I guess maybe he had a second job as an ice cream man, and maybe that's how he was able to get the kids. Whatever, he drives an ice cream truck now, and will immediately begin to stalk the sheriff's kids because, yeah, just pick off where you left off the very night you get out of prison. You see how people don't quite act normal here? You think you would lay low for a little while and wait for an opportunity, but no, he's just wreaking havoc. And I'll keep it pretty vague from here on out, but as I said at the top, Freddy Krueger's death does occur at about the halfway point of this episode, which isn't really a spoiler because, I mean, if you've seen the movies, you know this is going to happen. But I'm not a huge fan of how it's portrayed here. They act like Freddy was wanting someone to kill him so that he could become more powerful, but that doesn't really make sense because he was going on this revenge spree because he got killed, right? I thought that's why he was going after the Elm Street kids, but here it sounds like he wanted it. And I also don't like seeing it here because in part 6, the movies would show us this scene, and does this scene bear any resemblance to the version we saw in the movie? No, absolutely not. So we get another big continuity error there. Although that being said, that's more on Freddy's dead for not consulting the show when they made that movie, but again, whatever. The second half of the episode, when you get to see the sheriff be the first one that encounters Freddy in his dream form, it is interesting. I did like getting to see Freddy going after his first potential victim, and because I didn't really know where the story was going from there, I felt it to be a lot more interesting. That being said, it's nowhere near the quality of the movies. It's so much more low budget. There's so many moments that could have been more bombastic that weren't, although we do get a few fun Freddy gags here and there. I will say though, it does bug me because there are moments like Freddy literally writing this guy a letter and it appearing on his desk. There are moments where Freddy does seem to alter reality itself and not the dream world. Maybe this sheriff is just so sleep deprived that he's nodding off constantly. That's really the only explanation I can see for this. But whatever, as I said, this episode is far from perfect, but it does have a few interesting moments. There are a few fun Freddy gags. The idea that we get to see the trial, that we get to see Freddy as a human, even in a limited capacity. We get to see the factory that he worked at. We get to actually see the salvage yard from part 3. That's in there, so even though we would have some bad continuity, that would at least stay the same. And we did get to see Freddy's first victim. So yeah, it is an interesting enough little story, done in quite a cheap way. It's not the best thing ever, but it is fun enough for what it is. Overall, this kind of does seem like an obligatory first episode, and I'm more curious for the rest of the series if we're being honest, because that we're going into more uncharted ground. As a Nightmare on Elm Street prequel, it is interesting enough. I do wish it was better, but for what it is, it's totally fine. But again, I am more curious about the rest of these things. Anyway though, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. If you guys want to see me talk about more stuff, you can click right here and see more. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Playlist here. Have a good day now.